Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another episode review from the classic 90s Goosebumps television show. This episode comes from Season 3. It was directed by Don McCutcheon and written by Rick Drew. And the episode in question is Strained Peas. Y'all, I'm going to be upfront. I think this episode is one of the genuinely bad episodes from the Goosebumps television show from the 90s. Yes, I know there's a lot of opinions on the quality of the 90s Goosebumps show. And trust me, we can get into the whole rigmarole of what makes a bad Goosebumps episode or book bad, right? But when I think of bad Goosebumps, Strained Peas, whether we're talking about the short story or the episode, always comes to mind. And after rewatching this episode, after seeing it, now I think this is about the third or fourth time I've seen this episode in my lifetime. This was one of the later ones I got to watch in my lifetime, experiencing all the episodes at least one time. For the first time, I think this was an episode that I caught when I was in my early 20s. I have to say that every time I watch this episode, I can see little bits and pieces of what I like more than the previous time, but it's always still been a piece of crap to me. And I'm going to say this up front. If you're one of those people out there that hate on Strained Peas, I get it. I get it. The short story and the episode aren't that good, but I would actually go out of my way to say that I recommend this version over the short story version. So if you're out there and you're a diehard Goosebumps fan, maybe you've never experienced the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series or any of the short story episodes from the TV show, if you're going to go into Strained Peas, don't waste your time with the short story. Just watch the episode. I know the short story kind of has some, lore to it, I should say, because it was in Tales to Give You Goosebumps Book 1. It was reprinted in Thrills and Chills magazine back in the day. It got turned into an episode. It's definitely one of the more well-known Tales to Give You Goosebumps short stories. I mean, if you're a completionist like me, or you're a diehard fan and you want to experience every version, go ahead and read it. But all you need to do is watch this, and I think you'll get a general gist of the book short story with some tweaks here. This is one of the, closer to faithful but not quite episodes in the show. So it has enough changes for you to enjoy over the short story as well. But I would not go out of my way to recommend this episode to the casual person out there watching. You can completely save this for some of the last episodes to watch, and you'll be absolutely fine. So there you go. So with that out the way, Strained Peas, let's get into it. Let's talk about the episode and the plot without giving too much away. So Strained Peas is about the main character, Nicholas. I think he's 12 years old. In this version, he has a best friend named Sarah, and they have set up a surprise in their home in order to celebrate the coming home party of his sister named Grace. Now, if you're familiar with the short story, those of you out there that are well-versed in Strained Peas, the sister in the short story is named Hannah, not Grace. So this is a change that you'll notice off the bat. And the fact that Nicholas seems more excited to have a sister and a sibling. He's kind of wanted this for his entire life up until that point, and it's kind of better late than never for him, but he's excited that he gets to, have a sibling and wants to do something nice for his parents. Well, his parents come home, they bring home baby Grace, but once he meets her, he kind of gets the feeling that she doesn't like him. And every time she gets near him, she starts crying, and then she goes back to the parents, and she stops crying. So Nicholas feels mildly useless in trying to help his parents take care of Grace. And for her being a newborn, I don't know if it's the age of the actress who they hired to play this baby, but within a very short amount of time after she comes home, Nicholas hears his sister crying, goes to her room to check on her, and she's already pulling herself up in the crib like a 6-month-old would. Nah, that doesn't happen like that. But we'll go along with it. And he notices that when he says certain words to her, she seems to be responsive of it. And she seems to kind of have like this thing against him where she likes to like poop on him or barf on him, and there's this whole thing where she kind of spits up all over his shirt and ruins it, and he gets his mom to come in and take her while he goes changes his shirt, and he's like, look, she does this to me all the time, and she's like, come on, she's a baby, you know, and just be appreciative that you get to at least have these memories with your sister and stuff like that, trying to make him feel better about it. And he's like, yeah, whatever. But he starts to realize as the story goes along that there might be a little more to what's going on. Him and his friend Sarah are working on a project with this pet gerbil that he has for school, kind of showing him around this maze contraption. It's just a thing in the episode. It doesn't really matter diddly squat to the plot. But as they're talking, he's telling his friend Sarah that he doesn't really feel like his sister likes him, and he wants to figure out ways to maybe get her more acclimated to him. So while they're talking about it, Grace has this thing in her room where he decides to possibly go help and investigate. But when he does that, he notices that there has been something written on the blocks within her crib as he's talking to his friend Sarah, and the baby has orchestrated the bricks to read out "only me," implying that maybe the baby wants to be an only child. And this, of course, sets him off, and he's like, all right, well, look, you know, she wrote this, and he calls his friend Sarah, but he accidentally knocks down the blocks, and she's like, yeah, right, come on, man, you're just seeing this stuff, you're letting this big brother thing get to you a little bit. So he's like, yeah, whatever, you know, I saw what I saw, I know what I can read, I think she's out to get me. And later on, as the story goes along, he starts to get more into the you gotta believe me tropes, where these random events start happening to him that seem to signify that his sister is targeting him. I might be jumbling up the order of scenes here, but let's just give you a rundown because they all happen kind of randomly here anyway. He finds his math book with a chunk chewing out of it and thinks that his sister possibly ate and drooled all over it. He there's this whole thing involving him waking up in the middle of the night and hearing the TV being played, and he goes downstairs, finds stuff spilled all over the kitchen floor. He has a dramatic fall in the process, goes to investigate the TV. His sister is watching late night, you know, drag strip shows, and he's trying to turn the TV off, and she's holding the remote, and she actually talks to him. And when he gets caught by his parents, he's like, look, the baby was watching TV. You got to believe me. She made this mess. And he's like, and the parents seem to think that he's trying to frame his little sister, and they think he's doing it out of the want to get attention, essentially. And he's like, no, that's not it. She is trying to get me out of the picture. So he builds this, irritation with his parents up throughout the story, where he's gone to them a few times trying to tell them that this phenomenon is actually happening. They're, of course, not listening. So he takes matters into his own hands and reaches out to the hospital that his parents were at when they gave birth to Grace, reaching out to the doctor who delivered Grace and said, hey, there might be a switch up here. This baby that we got doesn't feel like it belongs in my family. So the doctor might look into the situation and possibly calls his parents to let him know that there might be an actual switch up. And this plays into the final part of the episode where the parents, they're upset that their son went behind their backs to do this, but they kind of do learn that there was a genuine mix-up, as we'll learn near the end. But when they leave the house to go talk to the doctor, the baby kind of knows that the jig is up, and Nicholas is like, look, I called the doctor, we're going to get rid of you soon anyway. But the baby kind of loses all care of trying to suppress that it might be sentient and it's able to talk. So essentially, it starts to walk and stalk like a monster, essentially. And there's a bunch of random stuff that happens in the climax. I don't really need to go over them. You'll see them. And they may or may not relate to a certain event that is very Slappy-esque, involving a mirror earlier with a, let's just say, some lipstick. And, yeah. Well, once that gets resolved, the climax, and the parents come back home, let's just say they confirmed that there was a mix-up at the hospital and that they got the wrong baby. And the ending essentially involves an exchange of babies from these two families. And we get to learn more about Grace's family and who she's about to go to. And it might be kind of dark as a punishment for her because she looks kind of scared. But in turn, they get a new baby in their possession named Chloe, and we get to see a plot twist possibly involved with Chloe, and that's where the episode ends off, and that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the episode Stray and Peas. Now, I did kind of skim the surface on some things, maybe involving some animal brutality, involving with the gerbil and all that, but that really doesn't matter. Just this episode is a bunch of random events anyway, so when you go in to watch it, take my review with a grain of salt. Some of these events could be out of order, but I really just don't care enough or remember the episode's order of events enough to care. Because if I'm being honest, let me just throw this out about Stray Peas. This is one of the only episodes, if not the only episode. Every time I watch this thing, my brain just shuts off. I really can't tell you why. I'm just not into it. I'd rather be looking at my phone. I'd rather be doing anything else but watching this episode. So that should tell you right now where this review is going to go from here. But I will say this. Let's start off with some positives here. And I'm shocked that I have some positives about Stray Peas this time around. Here's the thing. I think Stray Peas is a good inflection story about the oldest child syndrome, where when you go from an only child to being the oldest sibling, and often in these kids' horror stories, there's a dramatic age difference between the oldest kid and their new sibling. The thing is, with Stray Peas as a whole, even in the short story counterpart, is this idea that the parents seem to believe that all this phenomenon is going on because the main character, Nicholas, thinks it's happening or is orchestrating this stuff to look like it's happening to get attention. And while the story does get down into the annoying "you gotta believe me" tropes about it, there is some relatability to that, especially given my circumstances and in my childhood upbringing. I was the oldest child. I did have two younger siblings. One was 2 years younger than me. One was almost 7 years younger than me. So I did kind of experience my siblings from time to time trying to pinpoint stuff onto me to get me in trouble, and they tried to play up their young, youthful, innocence to my parents, and that seems to always, rub off on them. And that is something that Stray Peas is kind of mocking here, is that the baby represents innocence. The baby has no sentience, it has no idea of right and wrong, but the older brother does, and it doesn't matter what the baby does at the end of the day. The older brother should be the one taking responsibility for not making sure that this stuff doesn't happen. It's a complete farce on that idea, and it works in that way sometimes. But I will say this: I think the characters themselves and how they're written are fine. Like, Nicholas is a fine character, and the parents are kind of fine and stock for Goosebumps. But yeah, that's pretty much my token positive with it. It does offer more than your typical bad episode or bad story in Goosebumps. I even said that about the short story. Even though there's big missed opportunities and some weird convolution there and in the short story that kind of cloud the message either way, but I do think it's better executed here than in the episode, if I'm being honest. Now, with that out the way, let's get into these monumental sized negatives I have with this story. And here's the thing, off the bat, the story's disengaging, right? This is one of those episodes, if we're talking strictly on the episode's merit, it just hit the ground running. It throws you right into the events of the story. The baby comes home. We have no background of Nicholas's connection with his parents and his relationship with his parents. It's an evident issue that was also in the short story. You don't get a sense of how they operated before this baby comes into play. We only ever get to see Nick kind of trying to prove himself as a helper or somebody that is trying to win over the affection of his sister, but it quickly turns into trying to prove that his sister is a demon spawn. It's not as deep as it should be. It's not investable. So it's very bland. And it feels like things are just happening in the story. And this is one of those, like I said, one of those experiences. I can't explain why. Every time this episode turns on, my brain shuts off. Almost immediately. I think One of the biggest things is that the pace, while it's kind of fine, and while it's kind of random in terms of, it's kind of, trying to keep some stuff from the short story that sounded fun, I guess, in Rick Drew's brain, and adding some new stuff that he thought might be funny. But it's mostly just turn your brain off, just let it hit you in the face as it goes along type of thing. And it's not that engaging. So that's the first thing. The second thing about it is that the acting in this episode is extremely stiff. Whether we're talking about Nicholas's acting, the parents' acting is not that memorable. Even Sarah, who is, I think, a vested Goosebumps actor. She was in, I think, a few other episodes like The Headless Ghost, I want to say. She's not that good here. And the voice acting for Baby Grace is terrible. I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of defense out there for voice actors from this 90s show, but I have yet to see a voice actor unlike Cal Dodds or maybe the voice of Mary Ellen that I actually do like. And Grace's voice acting, and even Chloe's voice acting, mild spoiler near the end, is atrocious. And we haven't even gotten to the effects of the episode, okay? So the acting, voice dubbing, that's bad. It has bad ADR. The ADR in this episode is atrocious, especially when we're talking about Grace, who's the main baby. Her facial expressions do not match the tone of these sounds that are supposed to be coming out of her character. It's jarring at times. But when we get down to the effects, y'all, the effects in this episode have aged like milk, okay? The mouth over the baby's face is atrocious. The CGI in this episode is atrocious. All of it, mostly, is atrocious. Even the practical effects, where we see some monster hands near the end. Where was this stuff early on? And here's the thing. If this episode would have just looked at Strain P's short story and been like, nah, this thing sucks. Let's make something completely new out of it. Let's make it more fun, make it more funny, more farcical. Let's lean into the more absurd nature of the story and make it more over the top, more outlandish. This could have been a classic episode, I feel. Because Rick Drew sometimes could land really good comedy episodes. And here's the biggest thing that this episode got wrong from going from the short story to this. By keeping the baby the way it was in the short story, just a baby trying to be the centerpiece of horror, it doesn't land. It registers like something you would wince at, like a really bad street dancer on the streets of a city, and they're blocking the view of your walking path, and you have to just sit there and let them finish. That's what that feels like. And that's kind of the equivalent of watching this episode. They should have just made Baby Grace a monster. Instead of keeping her baby form, when you want to show her in a horrific way, have her transform into this monster creature and have her do more outlandish things and play into the parents' dynamic with Nicholas a little more in that. Prime example, if she has a teething toy or she has these baby toys, she takes gigantic bites out of it that are impossible to ignore because they don't have a dog or anything. And Nicholas shows his parents, like, look, the baby did this, and they completely ignore it, even though the toy's been in, like, the playpen of the baby the whole time. Yes, that stuff might be annoying to read, but in an episode, it's so outlandish that it could be funny. Or you can easily make more ridiculous things where, the baby's drooling all over his stuff, takes huge bite marks out of these things, and she's taking in big enough bite marks that she could probably kill Nicholas and makes him more worried that she might come after him and try to eat him. But no, I mean, none of that's in here. And the jokes, when they are in here, and here's another big thing that's wrong with this episode. The tone of the story is too serious for its own good. And when you get those silly moments, they register like wet farts. There's a whole thing when Nicholas falls down on the spilt stuff from the fridge. They play clownish cartoon music when these slapstick moments happen. It is over the top goofy for no reason. In that Dominique, Authen, and Gerard Halloween 5 type of way. It's bad. It's very bad. The kid music, I think, is a fine touch if we're talking just music and ambiance of the episode. But they overdo it, and they overdo this really cringy baby giggle that isn't edited in well, when the baby's shown in this little montages running around, it looks horrible, it sounds horrible, it's annoying, it's ear grating, and it's just another thing to add on to it. But the tone itself, I think, should have been way more out there, way more sillier, way more farcical, maybe in that Fright Night from Slappy World kind of way. And it could have been something, but it just wasn't, right? And all in all, for getting into the annoying tropes in this episode, this is a you gotta believe me story, very much like its short story counterpart. It's annoying here. The parents are dismissive of what Nicholas is saying. He goes to his parents multiple times before he finally works up enough courage to stand up on his own and do something about it. It takes a while to get to that point. It's annoying. I hate the trope. It's overdone in Goosebumps. This is a classic example of it, and I hate it deeply for that. It's that annoying type of it. And while it is understandable that who's going to believe that a baby is doing all of it, like I said, it doesn't add any of the humor that it should add to the situation. This you gotta believe me stuff could work if it was done in a funny way. It's not made to be funny, it's played up too serious. So it's cringe, right? And then I think one of the biggest detriments to, especially going from the short story adaptation to the episode, is that there's an iconic scene, or I shouldn't say iconic, but there's a moniker calling scene of why the story is called Strained Peas to begin with in the short story. And while Rick Drew decided to take some elements from the short story or scenes that he thought that sounded fun and keep them in the episode, the whole scene of the baby eating strained peas in the short story is not here. It's not here in the episode. Why is this episode still called Strained Peas? It's never a thing. It makes no sense. You know what I mean? It's just like dumb stuff like that. And you're just like, okay, it might seem so insignificant, but, it's kind of like if you remove the Stay Out of the Basement chant from the Stay Out of the Basement episode, and Dr. Brewer never chants that. Then why is it called Stay Out of the Basement? You know what I mean? It's dumb stuff like that. And it kind of shows me in these hindsight issues of these writers. I don't know if they were overworked by this point of the show. I don't know if they were given more creative control than ever by season 3. I'm assuming so. But I don't know what Rick Drew was on. He was writing this episode. And I don't know what Don McCutcheon was trying to do to salvage this, the editing team involved with this episode. But good God almighty, if I've ever seen a filler episode from Goosebumps, it's this. This is one of those episodes you can trim out of the whole show, and I guarantee you most, if not everybody, would not miss a beat not having this in the show. It's that depressing. And I'm being upfront about it. So yeah, this episode, y'all, is a wash. It's forgettable. It's bad. Not quite the worst thing ever in Goosebumps, but it's there. You know what I mean? So like from a 0 to 5 star basis, because the characters are fine and because the message is clear and the themes are there, I'm willing to be more forgiving on this. And I do think the episode, despite it being mostly cringe, does have its ironically funny moments here and there with a mild little chuckle out of me for just how dumb and silly it can be. So it does get a mild late 90s Fox Kids charm pass for me, but not in the way that you think. This is getting less than a 3. It's not getting a meh, it's getting a bad. But it's not getting a terrible or pushing genuinely awful. So it's not getting below a 2.5 either. But I settled with all the issues I have with it at a 2.6 out of 5 stars. Which might seem very high to a lot of you, but I still give this a D-. It's a bad episode. It's not the worst thing ever in Goosebumps, but it is, in my definition, of bad. I mean, here's the thing. This could have been good if the tweaks, I think, that should have been there were in there. But they over-relied and kept some things from the short story that didn't work there. And this was just a poor translation of it. Yeah, they might have improved the source material slightly by tweaking some parts of the character, especially the main character, Nicholas. But you can't just fix all your problems by tweaking little things like that. You got to do an overhaul sometimes. Strained Peas needed an overhaul. This was kind of like a cheap cash in, cash cow remake kind of situation, or something equivalent to that. So yeah, boo to you, Goosebumps, for making this. But you know, it is what it is. So that's my thoughts on Strain Peas' episode. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.